The bench was empty that morning, standing quietly beneath the same old tree, facing the same narrow street where mornings usually arrived one layer at a time, without anyone ever announcing that a new day had begun. The wooden surface looked smoother at the center than at the edges, darkened slightly by years of coats and hands, and bodies settling there in the same familiar spot, forming patterns that no one ever noticed while they were being made. The air was cool enough that breath lingered for a moment before fading, and a light wind moved through the branches above, sending thin shadows across the sidewalk in slow, unhurried motions. Across the street, the bakery lights were already on, glowing warmly behind the glass as someone inside moved trays into place. The soft scrape of metal against metal barely audible through the closed door. A delivery truck rolled to a stop at the curb and idled there, its engine humming steadily while the driver climbed down, stretched his shoulders, and carried 2 cardboard boxes toward the entrance without glancing anywhere else along the street. The bench remained empty as the morning continued to assemble itself around it, each sound and movement finding its place without interruption. A woman walked past holding a paper cup close to her chest, shoulders slightly hunched against the chill. Her eyes fixed on the thin stream of steam curling up from the lid as she slowed at the corner, checked the traffic light, and crossed without ever turning her head toward the space beneath the tree. A cyclist coasted to a stop at the red light and rested one foot on the ground, his gloved hand loose on the handlebar as he looked ahead, then briefly up at the sky, waiting for permission to move on. When the light changed, he pushed forward and disappeared down the street, leaving the bench exactly as it was, untouched and unnoticed. The bench had never needed attention to exist, and it had never demanded to be seen, which made it easy for the street to forget what it held when someone was sitting there day after day. Farther down the block, a school bus pulled in with a long mechanical sigh, its doors opening as children spilled out in small bursts of sound and color, backpacks bouncing as they hurried toward the side streets. One boy slowed for a moment near the tree, tugging at his jacket zipper as if deciding whether to stop, before glancing toward his friends and jogging to catch up, leaving behind only a faint scuff on the pavement near the bench. The bench stayed empty, holding the quiet space where repetition had once lived. A dog appeared next, nose close to the ground, leash held loosely by its owner, who walked with her phone pressed to her ear, voice low and distracted as the dog paused briefly at the base of the tree before being gently guided forward again. They moved on together, the dog's tail swaying once as they disappeared down the sidewalk, and the bench remained where it was, unclaimed. A city worker arrived wearing a reflective vest and carrying a long-handled broom, sweeping yesterday's leaves toward the curb in slow, methodical strokes that left the ground clean and orderly behind him. When he reached the bench, he swept beneath it carefully, clearing the space around its legs as if preparing it for use, then straightened and continued on without pausing or looking back. The bench was clean, ready, and still empty. By the time sunlight reached the edge of the building across the street, it spilled onto the sidewalk in a narrow band, warming one half of the bench, while the other remained in shade divided by a clean line that no one crossed. A man in a dark coat stepped out of a parked car, buttoned his jacket, checked his watch, and walked quickly toward the cafe, his attention fixed on the minutes ahead of him rather than the moment he was passing through. Behind him, a woman wearing headphones moved at a slower pace, lips forming silent words as she listened to something only she could hear, her gaze drifting forward without settling on anything in particular. The bench stayed empty as the morning grew busier, traffic increasing and footsteps overlapping as people moved through the street with purpose. If someone had taken the time to look closely, they might have noticed the faint indentation near the center of the seat where weight used to settle each morning, or the way the ground beneath that spot was pressed flatter than the rest of the sidewalk, shaped by repetition. But no one was looking that closely, because the bench had never asked to be remembered. As the hours passed, small groups of coworkers walked by with coffee cups in hand, their conversations blending into a steady murmur about meetings and plans, laughter rising briefly before fading as they turned the corner. Across the street, customers emerged from the bakery carrying white paper bags folded neatly at the top, one woman pausing near the curb to break off a piece of pastry and eat it slowly while standing, never once considering the bench beside her. She finished, folded the bag closed, and walked away, leaving the space unchanged. Thin clouds drifted in, softening the light and muting the street's colors, while a small bird landed in the tree above the bench, shook its feathers, and hopped along a branch before flying away again. The bench remained empty as the morning slipped quietly into midday, unnoticed and uninterrupted. If someone had sat there, they would have felt the cool of the wood through their coat and noticed the slight unevenness of the seat, the way it held the shape of a body without needing one to be present. They would have smelled coffee and bread, heard the street finding its rhythm, and watched the city wake layer by layer. But no one sat, and the routine continued without the familiar weight that had once anchored it. A young mother pushed a stroller past the bench, walking slowly as she rocked the handle gently, stopping nearby only to check her phone before moving on again, having never known the bench as anything more than part of the sidewalk. By noon, sunlight returned in scattered patches, flickering through the branches overhead and shifting across the bench as people passed in ones and twos. some talking, some silent, all of them moving through without stopping. The bench was empty, and no one asked why, because asking would have required remembering something small that had quietly disappeared. Light rain arrived in the early afternoon, tapping softly against the pavement and darkening the concrete in uneven circles as people raised collars, opened umbrellas, and quickened their pace. The bench grew damp, the wood darkening as moisture settled into its grain, and still no one sat. When the rain stopped and the light turned golden, the bench began to dry again. A man pausing nearby only long enough to shift grocery bags from one hand to the other before continuing on his way. As evening approached, streetlights flickered on and the cafe windows glowed brighter against the darkening sky. People passing with dinner plans in mind, their attention fixed ahead. Leaves fell from the tree and landed softly on the seat, remaining there as no one brushed them away or pushed them aside without thinking. By the time the bakery lights went dark and the street settled into its quieter night rhythm, the bench held the last of the day's warmth before cooling completely, still empty and still unnoticed. Somewhere, someone might have felt a brief pause, a flicker of confusion at the absence of something familiar. But the day did not stop for it, and the street did not ask the question out loud. The bench stayed empty that morning, and the city moved on, unaware of what it had lost. The next morning, the bench was still there, beneath the same tree, facing the same street, waiting quietly once again.